The master's wife hid in the cornfield at night. Only the slave man knew who she was running from. The night was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that swallows the air and dulls the moon until it becomes nothing more than a pale ghost behind drifting clouds. The wind moved quietly across the plantation fields, sliding over rows of drying corn like a whispered warning. Crickets clicked in the distance. An owl turned over a soft cry. But beneath all that, beneath nature's own nighttime breath, there was something else, something uneasy, something hiding. Samuel felt it long before he saw anything. He had just finished tending to the horses in the far barn, wiping sweat from his forehead even though the night was cool. The day had been tense, too many angry words between the master and the overseer, too many heavy looks passed across dinner tables and fields. Samuel had learned over the years that storms didn't always come from the sky. Sometimes they walked on two legs, carried whips, or slammed doors hard enough to shake the windows. He stepped outside the barn, letting the night breeze cool his face. The cornfield stretched to the left, tall and black under the moonless sky. Usually he feared the fields at night. There were animals, snakes, and the kind of stillness that made a man feel like someone stood behind him even when no one did. But tonight he felt pulled toward them, not by curiosity, not by fear, by a strange, sudden instinct, like the field itself was holding something it shouldn't. As he took a step toward the rows, he stopped. A faint rustle carried through the stalks, not the wind, not the usual shifting of dry leaves. This sound was heavier, desperate, like something or someone moving too fast for stealth but too afraid to stop. Samuel's stomach tightened. Someone was in there. He moved slowly, careful not to make noise. The moon finally slipped free from behind a cloud, and a thin silver glow spread over the rows. He reached the entrance to the cornfield, the stalks towering above him, their dry leaves brushing his arms like fingers trying to warn him back. That's when he heard it. A sharp breath, a muffled sob, the sound of fabric catching on husks. Someone was crying. And then, suddenly, a whisper, shaking, urgent, terrified. Please don't let him find me. Samuel froze, because he knew that voice. It was the master's wife, Caroline, not dressed in her usual calm, careful elegance, not standing on the porch or walking the garden path. Here, hiding deep inside the cornfield, crying, clutching her skirt in trembling hands, looking like someone who had run until she could run no more. Samuel didn't move at first. His heart slammed against his ribs, not from fear of her, but from fear of what it meant for her to be here, alone, at night, hiding in a place she had no reason to be. He stepped forward slowly, letting his footsteps crunch just enough on the dry ground so she would know it was him. He cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, it's Samuel." His voice was low, steady. "You all right?" Her head jerked up. In the dim light, he saw the streaks on her cheeks, the confusion and fear swimming in her eyes. She swallowed hard, once, twice, trying to find words. You can't be seen with me," she whispered. "Not right now. Not here." He looked around the field, scanning the darkness. "Ma'am, it's not safe for you alone out here." She shook her head violently. "It's safer than the house." That sentence stopped his breath. The house! What danger lived inside the walls where she was supposed to be protected? Caroline wiped her cheeks with shaking hands, trying to force herself quiet. "He's looking for me," she whispered. "I heard his footsteps. I heard him calling my name. He's angry, more angry than I've seen in years." Samuel's jaw tightened. "The master?" "No," she whispered sharply. "Not him." Her voice cracked like something breaking deep inside. "The overseer." Samuel felt the air change, felt the weight drop into his chest. The overseer, Carter, was a man built of meanness and whiskey, a man who watched everything with suspicion, a man who looked at people the way a wolf looked at prey. Samuel had learned long ago to move carefully around him. But the master's wife? Why would she be hiding from a man like that? She leaned closer, her voice trembling so hard he could barely hear her. "I heard him, plotting something. About the master." About the plantation. About. She shut her eyes tight, fighting tears. He heard me listening. Samuel inhaled slowly. The danger settled around them like another layer of darkness. Whatever she had heard, whatever Carter had been planning, she was now part of it. And he was now part of it too, simply because he had found her. "Ma'am," he whispered, "if he's out looking, we can't stay by the edge. Anyone could see the stalks moving. Let me take you deeper in till things settle." She hesitated only a second before nodding. Samuel led the way, pushing carefully through the rows. The dry leaves scraped their clothes as they moved, every sound amplified in the tense silence. Caroline followed close behind, trying to keep her breathing quiet. When they reached a small clearing, one Samuel knew from working the fields, he stopped. "Here," he said gently. "No one'll see you from outside." Caroline sank onto the soft ground, her breathing uneven. "Samuel, I don't know what to do," she whispered. "If Carter finds me, if he tells my husband anything, if he twists it, I—" Her voice cracked again. Samuel crouched nearby, not too close, but close enough that she could hear him clearly. "You're safe right now, ma'am. Whatever he planning, we'll figure it out." She looked up at him, eyes filled with fear, but also something else. Something like trust born out of desperation. "You're the only one who knows I'm out here," she whispered. "If he asks, if he searches, if he questions you, I won't say nothing," Samuel said quietly but firmly. "Not a word. Not unless you tell me otherwise." Her shoulders sagged with relief, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. "Samuel," she whispered, leaning forward just enough that the moonlight revealed the full terror in her face. "He's not just looking for me. He's hunting me." The cornfield rustled around them with the sound of dry leaves trembling in the wind. But Samuel knew, deep in his bones, that the field wasn't trembling from the breeze. Someone else was out there. Someone moving. Someone searching. And the master's wife wasn't wrong. The overseer was getting closer. The sound came again, soft, careful, but unmistakable. A boot shifting against soil. A husk brushing against cloth. A breath held too long in the dark. Samuel lifted his head slowly, his ears sharpening like an animal listening for predators. Caroline's breath caught when she sensed his alertness. Her hands tightened around her skirt, knuckles white even in the dim moonlight. "What is it?" she whispered, barely forming the words. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he raised one hand gently, signaling her to stay still. His eyes narrowed as he peered between the tall stalks. The cornfield wasn't silent anymore. Someone, moved with purpose. And it wasn't the wind. Samuel lowered his voice, so much that Caroline had to lean in to hear. "We ain't alone." Her breath trembled. "Is it him?" Samuel wasn't certain, but he knew the overseer's footsteps better than most. He had heard that heavy stride behind him in the fields for years, always close, always measuring him, always waiting for the right moment to find fault. What he heard now didn't sound like a man walking boldly. It sounded like someone searching, creeping, weaving through the field with slow, deliberate steps. "Stay behind me," Samuel whispered. "Don't move unless I tell you." Caroline nodded, swallowing hard. The rustling came again, this time from deeper in the rows, moving slowly, pushing through the stalks in a zigzag pattern. Whoever it was, they knew how to search. They weren't stumbling. They weren't calling out. They weren't making mistakes. They knew the cornfield. Samuel crouched lower, placing one hand softly against the ground to feel the vibrations through the soil. A trick he'd learned in the forest as a boy, before being old enough to work the fields. If the earth trembled a certain way, it could tell you distance, size, weight. The footsteps were heavier than Caroline's. Not light enough to be a child, not hurried enough to be someone fleeing, but they were close, too close. Caroline's voice trembled against the night. "Samuel, why would he come out here? What does he want with me?" Samuel didn't answer right away. He didn't want to confirm the fear already rising in her eyes. But he had his own thoughts, dark ones. If the overseer had seen her leave the house, If he suspected she heard something she shouldn't. If he was plotting something against the master. Then the master's wife knowing even a fraction of that plan made her dangerous. And dangerous people didn't disappear in broad daylight. They vanished in the quiet, where no one dared to look. Finally, Samuel whispered, "He don't want to be seen with you neither. If he's here, he hide in his own truth." Caroline pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. The footsteps came closer, closer than Samuel was comfortable with. The stalks shifted about 10 rows away. A shadow moved between them, faint but unmistakable under the moonlight. Caroline stiffened. Samuel felt a jolt of instinct. Protect first, figure out the rest later. He grabbed a handful of loose dirt and tossed it into the opposite direction, sending a faint rustle several rows over. The footsteps paused, waited, turned, moved toward the sound. Caroline looked at him, shocked. He put a finger to his lips. If Carter was indeed out there, and Samuel was nearly certain now, it was better for him to go the wrong way. They waited, holding their breath, listening as the footsteps faded slowly, pushing deeper into the rows away from them. Caroline pressed both hands over her chest, trying to quiet her heartbeat. Samuel leaned closer. "We need to move. Quiet and slow." She nodded. They crouched low and slipped deeper into the dark, weaving through the corn, careful not to disturb the stalks too much. Samuel moved first, checking each row, pausing before every turn. Caroline followed closely, her breath uneven but controlled. After several minutes, they reached a narrow path where the rows of corn opened into a small clearing. Samuel knew this place well. Workers sometimes rested here during harvest, hidden from the overseer's eye. It was a pocket of safer air in the maze of tall plants. Samuel paused at the edge and listened. The night carried 1,000 quiet noises, crickets, rustling leaves, the creak of a distant branch, but not the stalk-breaking steps of a man hunting. "We safe here for now," Samuel breathed. Caroline sank to her knees. The moon finally broke free of the clouds again, casting a soft glow over her face. Her eyes were red, her hair tangled from running, her dress streaked with dirt and broken bits of corn leaf. "Samuel, I can't go back to the house. Not yet." She wiped tears, her voice trembling. "If he's waiting, if he thinks I'll tell my husband what I heard." Samuel crouched in front of her, not too close, but close enough to speak quietly. "Ma'am, what did you hear?" Caroline hesitated, glancing around as if the shadows themselves were listening. "He wasn't alone," she whispered. "I thought I heard Carter arguing with someone, so I stepped into the hallway. I only meant to listen for a moment. But then I heard a name." She paused, swallowing hard. "My husband's name." Samuel stiffened. Caroline continued, voice barely audible. "Carter said the master was blind, that he trusted the wrong people, that he was too weak to run the plantation, and the man with him, whoever he was, spoke about debts, land, and getting rid of anyone who stood in the way." Samuel felt a cold rush inside him. "Carter, plotting against the master?" he whispered. Caroline nodded quickly. "I didn't understand all of it, but I know what anger sounds like, Samuel, and what greed sounds like. And this was worse. This was a plan." She wiped her eyes again. "And then, Carter heard me. I stepped back, but the floorboard creaked. I saw the shadow of his boots turn toward the doorway. I didn't wait. I ran out the back door and into the field." Samuel understood now. If Carter wanted power, land, control, then the master's wife overhearing plans would be dangerous for him. Too dangerous to leave unresolved. She looked at Samuel with trembling eyes. "If he finds me before I decide what to do, he'll twist it all. My husband believes Carter. He trusts him more than he should. If Carter lies before I speak, everything I say will sound like nonsense." Samuel clenched his jaw. He had seen many men like Carter, cunning, cruel, full of false loyalty and real hunger for control. But this was worse. This was calculated. He glanced back toward the deeper rows of corn. "If he find you alone out here," he whispered, "he'll make sure the truth never comes out." Caroline shivered violently. Samuel, what should I do? I can't stay here all night. Samuel looked up at the sky. The moon had risen higher. Midnight had likely passed. The master would soon notice his wife missing, if he hadn't already, and that could help or hurt them, depending on who reached him first. He had to think fast. He turned back to her. You got two choices, ma'am, he said quietly, voice steady. Neither one is easy, but both keep you alive. Her breath caught. Tell me. First, he said, you stay in this field till dawn. Carter won't search all night. He ain't patient. When the sun rises, you walk back like nothing happened. Say you were upset, needed air, needed space. No one can question you then. Caroline hesitated. And the second? Samuel met her eyes steadily. You let me walk you back tonight. Through the dark. Through the danger. And if Carter comes at you, I step between. Her eyes widened. Samuel, he'd kill you. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew it. She shook her head fiercely. No, I can't let you risk that. I won't. The wind pushed through the stalks again, and the shadows moved with it. Samuel sensed something shifting, something urgent. We ain't got long to decide, he warned. Carter's still in this field somewhere. He'll search until he finds something, or someone. Caroline pressed her hands to her temples. Samuel, I don't know what to do. He softened his tone. Ma'am, look at me. She lifted her tear-filled eyes. You ain't alone tonight, he said quietly. I'm here. I'll help you see this through. But you gotta choose. She swallowed, trembling. Then she whispered, stay with me. Just until morning, please. I can't walk back in the dark. I can't face him. Samuel nodded. Then we hide, he said. Together. Deep enough in the field that no man would think to look. Caroline exhaled shackily, relief washing over her features. But as Samuel helped her deeper into the protective thicket of corn, he couldn't shake a gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach. A feeling that Carter wasn't the only danger lurking in the darkness. A feeling that something larger was unraveling, something that would change the plantation forever. And before dawn came, the master himself would be pulled into it. Isaiah did not sleep the rest of that night. He sat inside the abandoned mule shed with his back against the warped boards, listening to the wind scrape across the rafters and the distant shuffle of boots from the patrol searching the fields. Each footstep made the wood in his chest tighten. Every murmur of a man's voice made him reach instinctively for the rusted hook hanging on the wall beside him. He kept imagining the same scene, torches lighting up the cornfield, men spreading out, and Julia pulled from her hiding place by strangers who would not stop to ask why she was there. But dawn came quietly. The patrol thinned out. The wind calmed. The only sound left was the trembling breath of the master's wife, asleep on a bed of burlap sacks, exhausted beyond pride or fear. Isaiah waited until the sky turned from ink to pale rose before waking her. Ma'am, he whispered, sun coming up. Julia's eyes opened slowly, like it took her a moment to remember the danger, the chase, the fear. But when she did, she sat forward at once. They'll be searching again in daylight, she murmured. I must get back before anyone notices my absence. Isaiah nodded. I'll take you round the back lots. Ain't nobody patrols there. By the time you reach the veranda, it'll look like you came out early to breathe before breakfast. Julia looked at him for a long moment, long enough for him to realize she was studying the expression on his face. Isaiah, she said quietly, you could have let me run into those men last night. You could have walked away. Why didn't you? His jaw tightened. He didn't know how to speak the truth without sounding bold. But she waited, truly waited, for an answer. Because what they were looking to do wasn't justice, he said slowly. And whatever trouble you running from, you ain't deserve their hands on you. She lowered her gaze. Shame flickered through her features like a shadow passing over the sun. Thank you, she murmured. But before Isaiah could reply, a sharp whistle split the morning air. Voices. Men! Getting closer. Julia's head snapped toward the shed wall, eyes widening with panic. "They're coming back," she whispered. "What do I do? Where do I go?" Isaiah froze only a second, then moved fast. He grabbed the small wooden ladder leaning against the wall and pressed it into her hands. "Up," he ordered, pointing at the rafters. "No! Now!" She climbed, trembling, pulling herself into the narrow crawl above the beams. Dust rained down as she shifted her skirt, pressing herself flat against the dark corner where the roof met the wall. Isaiah dragged a pile of burlap sacks across the floor and dropped to his knees just as the shed door flew open. A deputy and two farmhands stepped inside. One man wrinkled his nose. "Ain't nothing here but old mule feed." Isaiah kept his head down, hands busy tying an old rope, acting like he'd been there all along, doing some early morning chore. "Boy," the deputy barked, "you see a woman run through here last night?" Isaiah didn't look up. "No, sir." "You sure?" "Yes, sir. I been in the barn. Ain't see no woman nowhere round this way." The deputy's eyes narrowed, drifting around the shed. Above them, Julia's breathing was silent, but Isaiah could hear it anyway. Quick, shallow, terrified. One wrong move. One slip of dust. One loose board creaking under her weight, and both of them would pay. Finally, the deputy grunted. "If you see something, you best speak up. Last thing we need is a runaway woman making fools of us." The men turned and left. The door slammed. For a long moment, Isaiah didn't move, didn't breathe, only listened to the fading crunch of footsteps. When they were finally gone, Julia climbed down the ladder with shaking hands. "You lied for me," she whispered. Isaiah stood, did what had to be done. She stared at him, almost unable to speak. "If they'd found me up there, if they learned you'd helped me, do you realize what they would have done?" "Yes, ma'am." "And still you." "Ma'am," he said gently, "danger was coming for you whether I showed or not. Least this way, you ain't facing it alone." Her throat tightened. "I've never had anyone stand between me and danger before." Isaiah didn't answer. He simply opened the door and peeked out to check the path. The plantation was waking. Smoke curled from the cookhouse chimney. Field hands were gathering near the tool shed. The master was likely in the main house pouring coffee, unaware that his wife had vanished into the night and only just returned. "Follow me," Isaiah said. "Keep low." They slipped along the back fence line, past the hog pen and the old well, hidden by the tall corn that still clung to its late-season husks. Every step was measured, silent, quick. When they reached the rear porch, Julia paused. "This is where you leave me," she whispered. Isaiah nodded. But before she stepped away, she caught his wrist, an instinctive, desperate movement she didn't seem to realize she'd made. "Isaiah, please, not a word, to anyone. You got my word, ma'am." Her fingers released him slowly. Then she crept up the steps and vanished through the side door of the house, just as a kitchen maid came out to dump a bucket of ash. The girl never noticed her. Isaiah stood hidden behind the rain barrel, only exhaling when he heard the front door of the house open and the master's voice call out, "Julia, you up already?" Her voice answered, calm, steady, practiced. "Just stepped out for air." Isaiah closed his eyes for a moment. The lie held. But the danger hadn't passed, not even close. The plantation woke the next morning with a heaviness that Isaiah felt in the soil itself. It wasn't the usual weight of work or heat or exhaustion. It was something sharper, something tense moving through the air like a storm that had not yet broken but was gathering strength in the clouds. By the time Isaiah reached the cotton rows, whispers were already sliding among the hands. "They looking for someone. Trouble in the night. Ain't no patrol out this early unless somebody important asks questions." Isaiah kept his head down, but his ears stayed open. He could sense danger the way some men sensed rain, and danger was near. When the overseer rode down the rows, he wasn't carrying his usual coiled rope. He had a ledger in his hand, and his jaw was tight enough to snap. "All of you," he shouted, eyes front. Workers straightened. Isaiah gripped his picking sack to steady his breath. Someone on this plantation, the overseer's voice echoed, saw or heard something last night. The sheriff's men say a woman fled through the fields. They tracked her into our north lot, then lost her. He looked around slowly, too slowly. It is my job, he continued, to find out who helped her, or hid her. Isaiah felt the words like a blade pressing against his ribs. Julia had reached home safely. She had spoken to her husband without trembling. She had eaten breakfast at the head of the table with the poise of a lady untouched by danger. But the truth still hung in the air, invisible to everyone but the two of them. And if the overseer discovered even a sliver of it, Isaiah knew exactly what fate would follow. Now, the overseer barked, since nobody here will speak, we'll search the grounds again. Tool sheds, smokehouse, cornfield, barn loft. Isaiah's heart clenched. The mule shed. They would find footprints, disturbed dust, burlap sacks rearranged, maybe even the faint imprint of where Julia had pressed herself into the rafters. His breath thinned. Boy! The voice wasn't the overseer's. It was Samuel, a field hand whose shoulders were as wide as a doorframe. He was older, quiet, smart, one of the few who noticed everything. You I? Samuel asked under his breath. Isaiah nodded once. Too quickly. Samuel's eyes narrowed. Something on your mind. Ain't nothing, Isaiah answered, forcing his sack over his shoulder. But Samuel wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until only the corn leaves rustling in the wind could have heard. I seen you slippin' round the north lots last night. Isaiah's chest froze. Samuel continued, expression unreadable. You bringin' water to the mule shed. Thought maybe you was feedin' them stray hounds again. A pause. You wasn't feedin' hounds, was you? Isaiah swallowed. I ain't. Samuel lifted a hand. Don't lie. I ain't a skin to harm you. I'm a skin. So I know what trouble's standin' next to me. He said it without threat, without harshness, just truth. Isaiah opened his mouth to answer, but the moment broke when a high voice rang out from the terrace of the big house. Isaiah. Everyone turned. Julia stood on the veranda in a crisp morning dress, framed by sunlight like nothing unusual had ever touched her life. Her voice was calm, strong, almost commanding. Isaiah, she repeated, come here. The pump out back needs a strong hand. I want you to fix it. The overseer shot her a surprised look but said nothing. When the master's wife gave orders, even he hesitated to interfere. Isaiah stepped out of the row, forced his pace steady though his stomach twisted. As soon as he reached the veranda stairs, Julia gave him a tight nod. Follow me, she whispered. She led him behind the house, away from the eyes of servants and field hands, into the shade of the magnolia trees. Only when they were alone did she speak again. They questioned me, she said. The sheriff, the overseer, even Thomas, my husband. Isaiah stiffened. What'd you tell them? He whispered. The truth, she answered softly. Or enough of it. He tensed. No, she said quickly. I did not say your name. I did not mention where I ran. I told them I woke with a headache and stepped outside at night. I said perhaps the men saw the hem of my nightdress in the wind and mistook it for a stranger running. Isaiah exhaled, tension draining like water. But Julia wasn't finished. Isaiah, they didn't believe me. The relief that had begun spreading through his chest turned to ice. My husband is sending men out again this afternoon. The shed, the path, the cornfield. I love it. Isaiah stared at the dirt. They'll find something. Yes, she whispered. Footprints, disturbed sacks, evidence someone hid there. She moved closer, voice trembling even as she tried to keep control. And they will not assume it was me. Isaiah understood. They would assume it was him, that he had harbored someone, helped someone, lied, disobeyed. Every charge carried the same punishment. His life. Julia's voice dropped to a fragile whisper. I did this. I brought this danger upon you. Isaiah shook his head. You ain't had no choice. Trouble was coming for you. That does not change what follows, she said, eyes shimmering though she fought to keep them steady. If they accuse you, if Thomas suspects even the smallest connection, he will not hesitate. Isaiah looked toward the cotton field where the overseer rode back and forth, dust rising in angry swirls behind him. What you want me to do? Isaiah asked quietly. Run? Julia hesitated. If you run and they catch you, it would be worse. Then stay and take what comes? She closed her eyes. I don't want that either. They stood in silence, the cicadas humming around them like the world was unaware of the danger threading between their words. Finally, Julia looked up at him, determination replacing fear. There is one way to protect you, she said. Isaiah frowned. What way? I need to say something before the sheriff returns, she answered, voice firming into resolve. I need to tell a story that fits the evidence but removes any suspicion from you. Ma'am, you ain't. There is no other choice, Isaiah. He stepped forward. Whatever story you tell, it gotta be the truth. The truth, she said sharply, will get you killed. He didn't look away. Then lie for yourself. Lie for your husband. But don't lie for me. Her breath caught. Why not? 'Cause lies got chains on 'em, he said quietly. They pull the one who makes 'em down first. She stared at him, stricken. Slowly, she sank onto the wooden bench beneath the magnolia tree. Isaiah stayed standing. After a long moment, she spoke. There is something I didn't tell you last night. Something about the man who chased me. Isaiah stiffened. Who was he? Someone my husband hired. Someone meant to protect the property, she said. But he cornered me when I went to check the smokehouse. He put his hand. Her voice cracked. He would have done worse if I hadn't run. Rage flared hot behind Isaiah's ribs. Not at her, never at her, but at the faceless man who'd hunted her through the dark. Why ain't you tell nobody? He asked. Julia's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Because Thomas would not believe me. He only trusts the men he hires. They serve him, not me. Isaiah said nothing. His silence was the only place she could set her truth down safely. Then she stood, resolve returning like a blade being reforged. I will tell them that I hid in the mule shed, she said. That I climbed into the rafters myself to hide from the man. That any footprints, any movement in the dust, any disturbed sacks, all of it was me. Isaiah shook his head. They'll ask why you ain't say it sooner. I'll tell them I was ashamed. Afraid. Her jaw tightened. And if Thomas still doubts me, the sheriff will not. They will listen to a woman in distress before they will listen to a man in chains. Isaiah stared at her. You'll put yourself in danger for me? I owe you my life, she whispered. Let me pay part of that debt. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind the house. Julia stepped back quickly, smoothing her dress. The overseer appeared. Ma'am, he said stiffly. Your husband wants to see you inside. Julia nodded. Tell him I'm coming. The overseer's eyes flicked to Isaiah, cold, suspicious, before he turned away. When he left, Julia spoke one last time. Whatever happens, Isaiah, you must say nothing. You must not defend me. You must let my story standard. Isaiah swallowed the fire in his chest. Yes, ma'am. She stepped away, placing a hand briefly, shackily, on the veranda post as she climbed the steps. Just before entering the house, she looked back once. In that single glance, Isaiah saw everything. Fear, guilt, courage, and a promise she intended to keep. The door closed behind her. Isaiah stood alone in the shade of the magnolia, knowing one truth clearly. The real danger was only now beginning. The sun was high by the time the sheriff's wagon rolled onto the plantation road again, wheels grinding over the dry earth like warning drums. Isaiah heard it before he saw it, a rumble that sent a tremor straight through his arms as he lifted buckets at the water pump. He didn't look up, didn't dare. Voices drifted from the big house porch, low, tense, clipped. Thomas's voice barked something sharp, followed by the sheriff's slower, steadier replies. The overseer hovered nearby like a wolf waiting for permission to strike. Isaiah kept working, keeping his face calm, even while his pulse raced hot beneath his skin. He didn't know what story Julia had decided to tell. He didn't know how much she planned to reveal. All he knew was that she had gone into that house with her head high and her eyes steady. But standing firm and being believed were two very different things. Footsteps approached. Heavy. Purposeful. Isaiah braced himself just as the sheriff rounded the corner and stopped a few feet away. "Boy," the sheriff said, adjusting the brim of his hat. "You were seen in the north lots last night." Isaiah kept his eyes down. "Yes, sir. Taking feed to the mule shed." "Late at night?" "Animals don't keep the same hours as men," he answered simply. The sheriff studied him, long, measured. "You see or hear anything unusual? Anyone passing through? Any woman?" "I ain't seen no one but the mules, sir." It wasn't a lie. He hadn't seen her until she stepped into the light. The sheriff rubbed his jaw. "Your master says his wife was frightened last night. Seen a stranger lurkin'. Says she ran." Isaiah kept his expression blank. "Strange thing is," the sheriff continued, "there's signs someone hid in that shed. Marks in the dust. Footprints too small to be yours." Isaiah didn't react. "And your mistress?" "The master's wife," Isaiah corrected automatically. The sheriff's brow lifted. "Right. The master's wife. She says those prints were hers." Isaiah froze internally, but kept his hands moving, dipping the bucket into the trough. The sheriff watched him. "You believe her?" "Don't reckon my belief matter much," Isaiah said carefully. The sheriff let out a small grunt. "You're smarter than most think." Isaiah didn't answer. He couldn't read the tone, whether it was an insult, a compliment, or a warning. Before the sheriff could continue, the screen door creaked open above them. Julia stepped onto the porch, but Isaiah barely recognized her. Her hair wasn't pinned in its usual perfect coils. Her dress was wrinkled, her face pale except for two bright spots high on her cheeks. If she had slept at all, it hadn't touched her. But her eyes were fierce. "Sheriff," she said, descending the steps. "I have more to say." Thomas followed behind her, jaw clenched, clearly unhappy to let her speak at all. The overseer moved closer, like he expected trouble. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Go ahead, ma'am." Julia took a breath and began speaking in a tone that held both tremor and strength. "It was me," she said. "I hid in the mule shed last night, just like I said. The man who frightened me, one of the guards my husband hired, he followed me too closely. He cornered me in the dark." Thomas stiffened. "Julia," he began. "No," she said sharply. "Let me speak." The command in her voice surprised everyone, including Isaiah. "When I escaped, I ran blindly," she continued. "And I did hide in the shed. I climbed into the loft because I feared what he might do." Emotion cracked her words, but she didn't break. "The prints you found were mine. The disturbed dust was mine. Isaiah had nothing to do with it." The sheriff looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Ma'am, hiding something from your husband is one thing, but hiding from the law—" "I am not hiding anything," she said, lifting her chin. "I am telling you exactly what happened." Thomas stepped forward. "Julia, you're confused. You were upset. You said yourself it was dark. I remember his face," she snapped. "I remember his voice. And I remember running until my lungs burned." Her gaze flicked toward Isaiah for just a heartbeat, quick, almost imperceptible, but he felt it like a hand gripping his shoulder. "Sheriff," she said, "Isaiah saved me no trouble. He wasn't even aware I was there. He is innocent." The overseer scoffed. "With respect, ma'am, these folks lie as easy as breathing." Julia spun on him. "How dare you? You think fear belongs only to one color? Only one class?" Her sudden fire startled even Thomas. The overseer took a half step back, but the sheriff remained steady. "Ma'am, I'll have to question that guard you mentioned. You say he cornered you?" Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed strong. "Yes." "You willing to stand by that story with him present?" "Yes." "You realize your husband will have to dismiss him if it's true?" She hesitated, but only for half a second. Yes. Thomas's jaw clenched. Julia, you're making a spectacle. I'm telling the truth, she said. The sheriff exhaled and nodded once. All right then. I'll speak to the man. We'll see if his story matches yours. The boy stays put until then. Isaiah swallowed. That meant danger lingered. When the sheriff walked away to find the guard, Thomas grabbed Julia's arm. Have you lost your senses? He hissed. Do you know what you're accusing one of my men of? Julia pulled her arm free. Do you know what he did? Thomas stared at her, shock cracking his stoic mask. I told you, she whispered, and you didn't believe me. Thomas's face twisted, not in rage, but in something closer to fear. For his reputation, for scandal, for losing control of his own property. The sheriff returned moments later, dragging the accused guard, a tall man with a red beard and a mean smirk glued to his face. Ma'am, the sheriff said, tell us if this is him. The guard looked Julia straight in the eye with a slow, mocking grin. Evelyn, ma'am. Julia's breath hitched, but she didn't look away. Yes, she said. That's him. The guard scoffed. She wandered out half asleep. I barely said a word to her. Julia's voice sharpened. You grabbed my arm. Hard. The guard shook his head. Ma'am, you must have dreamed it. Isaiah felt anger burning up his throat, but he stayed silent. The sheriff studied the guard. Where were you when she ran? The guard hesitated, a split second too long. Isaiah saw the moment the sheriff noticed it. Let me guess, the sheriff said. You were patrolling. Nowhere near the smokehouse. That's right, the guard said quickly. Funny, the sheriff replied, 'cause another hand saw your lantern glow near the smokehouse door last night. The guard blinked. Just once. But it was enough. Julia stepped back, emotion shaking her shoulders. Thomas stared at the guard with dawning fury, not for what he had done, but for daring to bring shame into his house. The sheriff folded his arms. Seems your story don't hold. The guard's face twitched. She's lying. Enough, the sheriff barked. I ain't here to take your word over a woman's who got every reason to fear. He turned to Thomas. You want him arrested or fired? Thomas hesitated, trapped between public dignity and private pride. Dismiss him, he muttered. Get him off my land. The guard exploded. This is over a woman who can't even. He took one step toward Julia, and Isaiah moved before he could think. His body acted on instinct, the same instinct that had made him step between her and the darkness of the cornfield. He placed himself between Julia and the guard, not threatening, not raising a hand, simply standing like a wall the man would have to climb through. The guard stopped, eyes narrowing. The sheriff shoved him back. I said enough. Two deputies dragged him toward the wagon. Thomas turned to Isaiah, fury rising in his throat. You step forward like that again and... But Julia cut him off. He stepped forward because you didn't. Silence cracked like a whip. Thomas stared at her, stunned. Never in his marriage had she spoken to him like that. Not in front of men. Not in public. The sheriff cleared his throat. Seems the matter's settled, he said. The prints were hers. The boy's clean. I'll note it in my report. Relief hit Isaiah like a wave that almost knocked him off balance. Julia exhaled shackily. Her hands trembled, though she hid them at her sides. Thomas clenched his jaw. Fine. This is finished. But Isaiah knew better. This wasn't finished. Not even close. When the sheriff's wagon thundered down the road again and the plantation workers drifted back to their tasks, Julia remained on the porch steps, eyes distant, breathing uneven. Isaiah began to walk away, head lowered, but her voice stopped him. Isaiah. He turned. You didn't have to stand in front of him, she whispered. Not like that. He shook his head. Somebody had to. Thomas watched from the doorway, expression dark as a gathering storm. Julia noticed. She stepped back slowly, the courage in her face dimming but not disappearing. We aren't safe yet, she whispered. Not you. Not me. Then, barely audible, be careful, please. She slipped inside before Thomas could speak, the door closing behind her like the final beat of a drum. Isaiah walked back toward the fields, the weight of survival pressing into his shoulders. The danger was not gone. It had only changed shape, and the truth, spoken or hidden, was now a fire burning under all their feet. Night returned to the plantation like a slow closing hand, shadows stretching long between the barns and trees. The air was heavy with the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, quiet, but too stiff, too breathless to be peace. Isaiah felt it in every step as he returned from the last round of chores. The ditch behind the cornfield trickled with water from the day's irrigation, frogs croaking in the reeds. The world looked the same, but the day had changed everything. Julia's truth had saved him. The guard had been dragged away cursing. The sheriff had written his report. And Thomas had looked at his wife and Isaiah like something fragile inside him had cracked. Isaiah didn't know what that fracture meant. Not yet. As he crossed the yard toward the slave quarters, the door of the big house opened with a soft creak. Lantern light spilled onto the porch. Julia stepped out. She was alone. Isaiah's steps slowed, but he didn't turn fully. Not until she spoke. Isaiah. He turned. She came down the steps, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, breath turning into pale clouds in the cool air. "Walk with me," she said softly. He hesitated. The danger of being seen with her again was a rope pulling tight around his ribs. "Ma'am, now might not be." "I know," she whispered, "but I need you to hear something." She walked past him toward the magnolia trees behind the house, the same place she had stood trembling that morning. He followed at a distance, watching the windows to make sure Thomas wasn't peering through the lace curtains. When they reached the shadowed space beneath the wide branches, Julia turned to him. Her face looked different now, still pale, still shaken, but calmer, almost resolved. "I spoke to Thomas," she said. Isaiah swallowed. "And he's angry," she admitted. "Not at you. Not exactly. But at the situation. At me." She ran her fingers along the rough bark of the magnolia trunk. "He said I embarrassed him, that I made him look weak in front of the sheriff." She paused. "He said a wife should never contradict her husband in public." Isaiah shifted uneasily. "I'm sorry if I caused." "No," she said, cutting him off. "This was my choice. I would do it again." Her voice didn't tremble this time. It rang with a quiet strength that seemed to grow the more she spoke. "When I watched that guard smirk at me, when I saw him lie without fear, something inside me snapped," she said. "And then when you stepped between us, Isaiah, I realized you were willing to take the blow meant for me." Isaiah shook his head. "I wasn't thinking, ma'am. Just doing what felt right." She stared at him, eyes bright. "That's what frightened me most. That you could be punished for something that wasn't yours to bear." Silence fell. The wind moved through the trees, scattering pale petals across the ground. "Thomas told me," she said quietly, "that he wants things calm, unquestioned, untouched." Isaiah could hear the weight behind the words. "But," she continued, lifting her chin slightly, "I told him I will not stay silent after being cornered. I will not pretend nothing happened." Isaiah's brows lifted slightly. "He take that well?" "No," she answered with a small, knowing breath. "No, he didn't." She looked away toward the house, its windows glowing softly like watchful eyes. "Isaiah," she said, voice low, "I don't know how long Thomas will stay angry. I don't know how long the overseer will keep looking at you sideways. I don't know what comes next." He nodded slowly. "It ain't your burden, isn't it?" she said sharply. Then her expression softened. "You saved me twice. Once in the cornfield, and again in front of the guard. I owe you more than just gratitude." Isaiah shifted, uncomfortable. "How things like that only bring more trouble." "Maybe," she said, "but sometimes trouble is worth facing." Another long pause stretched between them, broken only by the soft creak of branches. Isaiah finally spoke. "What you call me out here to tell me?" She closed her eyes briefly, gathering courage. The sheriff said he won't return unless there's more reason to. She exhaled. But Thomas, he's sending the overseer to question the hands again tomorrow. He wants reassurance, obedience, order. Isaiah felt a heaviness settle in his chest. Then I'll keep my head down. Stay quiet. That won't be enough, she whispered. He frowned. Why not? She stepped closer, not dangerously close, only near enough that her voice didn't carry. Because the overseer hates you, she said flatly. Because you stepped forward in front of him. Because you showed courage. Men like him can't stand courage from someone they think should have none. Isaiah didn't deny it. She lifted her chin. So I told Thomas something else. He braced himself. What? I told him I want you reassigned. Isaiah blinked. Reassign? She nodded. To the stables. Away from the overseer. Away from the fields where he can watch you. Thomas believes it's my nerves talking. But he agreed. Isaiah's chest eased in a slow breath. The stables were quieter. Safer. More isolated. A man could think there. A man could breathe. But he saw the cost in her eyes. You did that for me, he said quietly. She shook her head. I did it for the truth. And for my conscience. They stood a moment without speaking. Crickets buzzed. A lantern flickered in the distance. Finally, Julia exhaled shackily. I don't know what the future holds, Isaiah. Not for me. Not for you. But something changed last night. And again today. He didn't answer. His silence wasn't avoidance, it was acknowledgement. She seemed to read it. We can't speak often, she said. Not like this. Not even in passing. It puts us both at risk. Isaiah nodded. But, she continued softly, you are not alone in this place. You proved that when you stood in front of me. And I won't let you face the consequences alone. He met her eyes then, just for a moment, and saw something steady inside them. Not affection, not danger, not anything forbidden, just human recognition. And maybe that was the rarest thing of all in a world built on cruelty. Footsteps sounded from the porch. Thomas's silhouette filled the doorway. He called her name. Julia stiffened. I have to go. Isaiah stepped back into the shadows. She hesitated, then gave him one last nod, small, quick, but full of meaning. Stay safe, she whispered. Please. Then she turned and walked toward the house. Her figure, fragile and determined, moved beneath the golden lantern light before the door closed behind her. Isaiah remained under the magnolia tree for a long moment, letting the night settle over him. He felt the weight of her trust, her truth, her risk, and he felt something else too, resolve. He walked back toward the slave quarters with quiet steps, passing Samuel on the way. Samuel lifted a brow. You still breathin'? That's something. Isaiah gave a small exhale, almost a laugh. Yeah, it is. You gonna be all right? Samuel asked. Isaiah nodded. Don't know, but I know I ain't alone. Samuel studied him, then grinned slowly. Never was. Isaiah returned the faintest smile. When he reached his small cot and lay down, he expected fear to creep back into his chest. Expected the memory of the cornfield, the mule shed, the sheriff's eyes, the guard's smirk, Thomas's anger. But instead, another picture settled in his mind. Julia standing on the porch steps, hands trembling, voice steady, speaking truth no one expected her to speak. He closed his eyes. The plantation was still dangerous. The overseer still breathing down his neck. Thomas still watching him with a wary, wounded pride. But something fundamental had shifted. The chain had bent, not broken, not snapped, but bent. And one day, Isaiah knew, even chains grew thin where they bent too many times. For now, he breathed the night air deeply and let his heart slow. For now, he was alive. For now, he had a place in the stables, away from the overseer's eye. For now, the truth had won a small battle. And for now, that was enough. As sleep settled over him, he whispered into the dark, Tomorrow'll come, and I'll meet it standing.